Hello, I'm Daniela. Today's video, I'm going to show you how to use the sewing tool, the Point Turner and Seam Ripper. It's a two-in-one tool that does actually more than just those two techniques. You can use it to crease fabric, to make a little bit of a crease if you don't want to turn on your iron. You can use it to guide fabric through a machine, and you can use it to turn your points on your collars or pockets or anything with a right angle, where you sew with the right sides of the fabric together and then you want to flip it open and you want to get that sharp point. Well, this tool is for you. It's very easy to use, very lightweight, and very inexpensive. So let me show you how I use it.
So this is a seam turner and presser. It's a really handy tool. This one's made out of bamboo. It's not my favorite. I prefer the plastic ones because I just personally don't like the feel of the bamboo on my hands. It kind of creeps me out a little bit. But it's a very valuable tool nevertheless, and I do use it. It has a rounded edge here, which is great for pressing seams or pressing anything if you don't want to pull out your iron for a temporary press. So it gives a nice flat area. It's not sharp, and it has a little sharp point here. Now it's not sharp like a needle sharp. It's just sharp enough that if you're pressing out the inside of a folded piece and you want to press out the corners, this will work. Now obviously with enough pressure you can press through the seams and break them, but if you just use moderate pressure, gentle to moderate, you won't puncture your skin, and you also can press out the seams, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. There are other tools you can use and other things you can use if you don't have one of these particular items. So this is a little stiletto or a little awl, but it's not a sharp one. So with enough pressure, it could obviously puncture fabric or your skin, but it can also be used in a pinch to press out those seams and those corners. Depending on the size of the item you're trying to press out the corners, this little bamboo like straw worked very well. This is the purple thing, which has very similar ends to the one I showed you originally. It's got a little flatter end here, it has a little measurement, a little hole, and something that you can stick inside and poke out the corners. And this is just a dowel. So just like the bamboo skewer, that could work as well. And if you don't have any of these things, in a pinch, the back of a pencil could work, or even a non-particularly sharp pencil, or the back of a paintbrush. So let me show you both on a round and a square piece of sewn fabric how we can push out those corners nicely. So here's a rectangular piece of fabric. Now if you look closely, you can see the marker line I drew for my seam to sew it. And then I have a little sewing seam here. There are two pieces of fabric with a little opening in the center. Before I turn it inside out though, to get those nice crisp corners, I need to use my scissors. So I'm just going to cut right by the corner. You can see the difference. There's only 1/8 of an inch or so. And I'll do this on all the corners. I'm just trying to cut so that when I turn it inside out, the fabric that's there won't press those corners round. Now, if you want, you can trim it even further, closer to that seam. Now for my application, this is going to be a pin cushion. It's not as necessary. A little extra fabric is not going to hurt me. I'm not looking for a pristine edge. So now from here, I can open my little sewn piece, my 2 layers. As you can see, that's the inside piece. And so just by using my fingers, I can start to press it out, pressing right on the seams, just to develop that shape of that rectangle. It takes a little bit of time, but I can press out the edges somewhat. Again, I'm just pulling the fabric apart. Now to get the really crisp edges, you'll want to take your iron and press your piece down when it's completely done. But as you can see here, the corners are rounded and I want them more square. So I'll just take my tool, stick it in the opening, and I'll go to one of the corners and I'm gently just working that fabric, that point out. Then I'll do that on the next one. And I like to go to the corners that are further away, but it really doesn't matter what order you go in. And I'll do this to all the corners. Takes a little finagling sometimes. And depending on the size of your piece, the larger pieces are a little easier to turn the corners and to get the sharp corners than the smaller squares. So just take your time, play around, poke out those corners, and then you could take your iron and press it. And I have a very nice piece here. I can stuff that with my filling and have a little pin cushion. So I'll work on that in the future to finish that pin cushion, but you can see the nice corners that I obtained by using this tool. Now it's a little different on the rounded because there are no corners, but you still have a little work to do to make the shape, that nice rounded shape. So as you can see, the dark line is where I traced with my marker to make my circle. Then I stitched it with my machine, and I left a little opening here for turning it. Now to turn the circle, it's a little more important to trim those edges nicely. So I like to just come in here and leave a little bit of a gap between the raw fabric and the area where I sewed down. So I'll just trim around. It doesn't have to be perfect, but a little gap is very helpful. I always like to leave a little more fabric on the area where I'm going to fold it in eventually. Now to get nice crisp edges on turning a circle, this is a large circle, so the smaller circles require more of this, but this is an example. You want to clip the fabric here every so often. I'm not taking it all the way down to the seam that I made. I just want to make sure my fabric has a little place to give and to move so that my final shape is rounded. In most cases, you won't be stitching a perfect circle. You might have like a rounded corner for a shoulder, just part of it. And you want to make sure you clip that area just to get that nice rounded edge. So you can always unfold it and reclip it if you need to. But from here, I just come in through the opening that I left. And again, I pull the fabric around. So now it's right side out. I use my finger to just make that circle. It's coming along nicely. And for the most part, it works out really well. I can always take my tool. This time I'll take that rounded edge and just come in here and pull it across. Just trying to make sure that that fabric splays out nicely and I get the rounded shape. Then I'll just tuck the edges here to complete that shape, playing around just to finish that off. And I can stuff it and stitch it closed. So as you can see, it's not quite rounded yet. I'll work that out a little bit further. And there I have my rounded shape. It's great for stuffing. I can make my pin cushions now, all with the help of this little tool.
So that's how I use the Point Turner sewing tool in my work. I think it's really valuable for getting those corners nice and sharp. And because of that point that doesn't really come to a sharp point, it's great for removing basting stitches. The rounded edge also helps press out seams nicely. It gives a nice crease to your fabric. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.